For years, astronomers believed the greatest cosmic mystery of our time was a single interstellar traveler, 3I, Atlas. It appeared suddenly, defied predictions, and left scientists scrambling to understand its strange behavior. But that story, dramatic as it was, now feels like an opening chapter to something much larger, something far more complex. Because the truth emerging now is that Atlas may never have been alone. And what has begun to unfold in our skies over the past months is rewriting everything we thought we knew about the universe. It began quietly, a faint flash on a winter night recorded by an automated survey telescope in Arizona, the kind of flicker that astronomers catalog and forget about 1,000 times a year. But then similar blips started showing up in Chile, Namibia, the Canary Islands. Small disturbances in data streams, so subtle they were initially dismissed as noise, thermal interference, instrument drift, atmospheric static, but the patterns kept returning, and they were too clean, too periodic, too coordinated to come from simple chance. Something was entering the solar system. And this time, it wasn't just one object. The first clear detection came from an observatory in northern Chile, where a graduate researcher noticed a dim emerald glow shifting across the field of view. A comet, small and unremarkable in structure, but unusually bright for its size. Within hours, telescopes worldwide locked onto it. The more they observed, the stranger it became. The object radiated a vivid green sheen unlike anything expected from a typical comet. Diatomic carbon was the obvious explanation, but the intensity of the glow grew, accelerating far faster than solar excitation alone could explain. The comet seemed to brighten in deliberate pulses, almost as if absorbing sunlight and re-emitting it with increasing efficiency. It was quickly given a name, the Green Wanderer. But before researchers could finish their first analyses, a second anomaly was spotted. A long, thin streak of light stretching across millions of kilometers appeared in deep sky exposures. At first, scientists assumed it was a known comet Lemon, an old wanderer cataloged decades earlier, famous for long, predictable arcs through the dark. Except this time, Lemon was doing something no one had ever witnessed. Its tail had erupted into a colossal plume, hundreds of millions of kilometers long, far greater than any natural outgassing event previously recorded. The violent expansion defied expected thermal behavior, and most puzzling of all were the subtle but extremely precise corrections in its orbit. Minuscule, consistent, and too deliberate to be caused by jets of evaporating ice. Lemon was not drifting. It was adjusting. By the time astronomers realized these two events were unfolding simultaneously, a third object emerged. A comet with a fractured, flickering light curve. Instead of the stable glow typical of icy bodies, this one pulsed, brightening and dimming in perfect rhythm, as though obeying an internal clock. Its name became the Split Light, inspired by the way its illumination seemed to stutter and fracture as it moved. Then came the real shock. Radio telescopes detected faint, rhythmic emissions coming from its direction. Weak, but unmistakably structured. A pulse every 9 hours. Disturbingly, that same signal, identical in period, was found to be subtly embedded in the emissions around both Green Wanderer and Lemon. 3 objects, 3 unique signatures. One shared frequency, but the sky wasn't finished. A fourth visitor appeared, next one that, unlike the rest, gave off no light at all. No tail, no glow, no reflected sunlight. It was invisible to optical telescopes. The only reason anyone knew it existed was because radar arrays started returning irregular echoes from a cold, dense body moving through the void with astonishing speed. The object was designated 2024 YR4, but astronomers quickly started calling it something else, the Silent One. A dark asteroid with a surface that returned radar reflections in perfectly timed patterns, once again matching the 9-hour cycle of the other three. 4 completely different objects, 4 different compositions, 4 distinct behaviors. Yet all of them were synchronized. Even then, the most disturbing revelation had yet to come. As orbital solutions were calculated for each object, the trajectories mapped out something extraordinary. Not random paths, not the erratic, uncorrelated courses typical of interstellar debris like Oumuamua or Borisov. Instead, all 4 were traveling along what scientists began calling a cosmic corridor, a narrow, sweeping route threading into the inner solar system from a distant region far beyond the Kuiper Belt. The alignment wasn't perfect, but it was shockingly close. Their arrival times differed by mere days. Their orbital inclinations were nearly identical. Their velocities, though unique, converged toward the same gravitational pathway. The more data astronomers gathered, the more improbable the situation became. The statistical odds of 4 unrelated interstellar objects entering the solar system at the same time, following similar orbits, and sharing a synchronized energy rhythm were so minuscule that several researchers refused to publish early estimates, fearing they would be dismissed as sensationalism. Still, the evidence kept building. As Green Wanderer neared the sun, its emerald glow intensified beyond what solar radiation models predicted, as though some inner mechanism were amplifying the energy it received. Lemon's massive tail began twisting in deliberate arcs, its trajectory correcting by microdegrees at regular intervals. Split Light's flickering pattern accelerated slightly, yet never broke its 9-hour cycle. And Silent One, cold, unlit, invisible, rolled silently along its path, its radar return signature beating like a shadowy echo of the others. If the 4 were fragments of a larger body, the differences in their compositions made no sense. If they were pieces of a disrupted star, asteroid, or rogue planetary core, their synchronized movement defied physics. If they were a natural cluster from a distant system, their shared periodic cycle was beyond explanation. Theories piled up from magnetic resonance to exotic matter interactions, but none could satisfy the simplest question at the heart of the mystery. Why now? Why together? Why synchronized? By the time the 4 objects approached the outer boundaries of Earth's orbital region, the atmosphere itself began to respond. Auroras brightened unpredictably. Low-level geomagnetic ripples appeared across global monitoring stations. Radio networks experienced brief periods of distortion, always spaced eerily close to the 9-hour cycle. Scientists scrambled to understand the cause. But before they could assemble a full explanation, something even stranger occurred. As the 4 objects crossed the plane of Earth's orbit, they vanished. Not destroyed, not scattered, not fragmented, simply gone. Optical telescopes saw nothing. Infrared arrays detected no heat. Radar returned silence. All 4 disappeared simultaneously. And that is where the real mystery begins. When the 4 objects vanished, the astronomical world erupted in confusion. Space agencies released calm, measured statements claiming the objects had merely passed beyond detection range, but behind closed doors, the tone was very different. Internal reports leaked from multiple observatories hinted at the same disturbing detail. All 4 signals, optical, infrared, radar, and radio stopped at the exact same moment. There was no fading, no gradual loss of resolution, no distortion. One moment, the objects were there. The next, they were erased. Scientists attempted to rationalize the disappearance as an observational blind spot, but the data didn't support that explanation. The disappearance occurred in open space, not behind the sun, not in a region of dust, not near a gravitational lens. The solar system is not known to possess any region where light, heat, and radio can all vanish simultaneously. Yet that's exactly what happened. To uncover answers, astronomers turned back to the early data, retracing every step that led to the moment of disappearance. They revisited the infrared signatures, first captured from Chile and Namibia. Even at extreme distances, the objects radiated faint but clear patterns of heat, patterns that once again appeared synchronized. Green Wanderer emitted pulses of warmth that matched the 9-hour radio cycle. Lemon's thermal signature was more chaotic, likely from its tremendous tail, yet even that turbulence seemed to drift toward rhythmic order. Splitlight's heat map jumped in tight bursts correlated with its flickering glow. Silent One, the coldest of them all, produced a radar echo that brightened and dimmed in perfect time. Each of them followed its own rules, yet all of them obeyed the same timing. This led to the first groundbreaking hypothesis. The objects might not be communicating, but resonating. Like 4 instruments in a symphony playing in harmony through shared physics, not through intent. The idea energized the scientific community. Researchers modeled interactions between interstellar magnetic filaments, cosmic dust streams, and ultra-long-range gravitational nodal lines. Their simulations suggested the possibility of a rare cosmic pathway, a naturally formed corridor that could channel objects across stellar distances. If such a corridor existed, the synchronized pulses could be a byproduct of the objects moving through it, but this theory collapsed when new simulations incorporated the orbital data. Natural corridors do not cause synchronized timing, they guide motion, not oscillation. Whatever linked the 4 objects was not just external. Something was happening inside them. And so attention turned to the materials themselves. Green Wanderer's spectrum pointed to diatomic carbon, but the intensity far exceeded known cases. Lemon's tail showed traces of unusual heavy elements, nickel concentrations too high for a typical comet, but too low for industrial waste. Split Light produced sporadic bursts of ionized gas whose chemical makeup didn't align with any previously cataloged icy body. And Silent One, though dark and inscrutable, reflected radar in patterns that hinted at a surface with unusually consistent density, almost like a manufactured shell. These findings reignited a far more controversial hypothesis. The objects could be probes, tools, or artifacts created elsewhere. The astronomical establishment had always resisted such implications, wary of invoking intentional design too quickly, but the synchronized behavior forced even the skeptics to consider it. No natural comet cluster had ever been recorded exhibiting shared timing cycles across different wavelengths. No asteroid had ever been seen adjusting its rotation to match distant objects. And no interstellar body, natural or not, had ever disappeared with 3 companions in a single synchronized instant. Still, the scientific community proceeded carefully. The next step was to analyze how the objects had influenced Earth itself in their final days of observation. The timing of increased auroras, geomagnetic oscillations, and radio distortions perfectly coincided with the passing of the objects through specific regions of space. These disturbances were subtle but global, affecting satellite tracking, low-frequency communications, and even the Schumann resonances of the atmosphere. For the first time, Earth was responding to something it could not see. As the investigations deepened, astronomers began piecing together an even stranger timeline. Roughly 30 hours before the objects vanished, all four began to slow. Not enough to break their predicted orbits, but enough to register across the radar stations in Alaska, Hawaii, and Australia. This deceleration was faint but deliberate. The objects were shedding velocity in perfect unison, and they did so at a point in their trajectory where no natural deceleration should occur. Gravity from the sun was pulling them faster. Outgassing was too weak to counteract that force. Yet the objects resisted acceleration. The timing of this slowdown was even more unsettling. It lined up precisely with a global spike in geomagnetic noise. Instruments in Canada, Russia, and Scandinavia all recorded sharp anomalies, brief pulses that radiated outward through the magnetosphere. The pulses repeated 3 times over 9 hours. After the third repetition, the 4 objects stopped slowing. They stabilized. And then, less than a day later, they disappeared. Scientists debated whether Earth's magnetic field had interacted with the objects, or whether the objects had somehow initiated the disturbance. The data couldn't answer the question. It only confirmed the timing. And the timing pointed to one possibility. The objects were responding to something. The next theory proposed was that the objects might have crossed a boundary, a region in space where interactions with solar, wind, and the interplanetary magnetic field behave in unpredictable ways. Perhaps a distortion, a fold, a micro-warp in space-time. Some astrophysicists speculated about local anomalies regions where gravity behaves differently due to unseen mass concentrations or remnants of ancient stellar events. But the solar system had been mapped extensively. No such region had ever been found. And if a distortion existed, it was odd that it would affect precisely 4 synchronized objects while leaving everything else untouched. In search of further clues, astronomers studied the paths the objects traveled to reach the solar system. Their approach vectors, when traced backward, converged not at a single point, but at a region of interstellar space, roughly 20 light-years away. This region held no known stars, no exoplanets, no clusters, no dust clouds dense enough to birth such objects. It was an empty stretch of the galaxy, yet something had sent them here. The synchronized pulses offered another clue. 9 hours. Exactly 9 hours. Not 8 hours and 57 minutes. Not 9 hours and 5 seconds. Every pulse identical, regardless of object size or composition. This precision was unnatural. Even natural resonances drift over time, influenced by heat, rotation, collisions, magnetic forces, and solar wind. But not these. If the 4 objects were machines, even ancient, drifting, forgotten machines, the 9-hour signal could be a system timer, a calibration cycle, or a communication beacon. If they were natural, then something was binding their internal processes in perfect unison. Neither explanation satisfied everyone. What did satisfy all parties was the need for more data. Plans were proposed to send probes, fast-track missions, even repurpose existing satellites. But before any agency could act, one more twist arrived. Hours after the objects vanished, radio telescopes detected a faint echo, a low-frequency ripple passing through the solar system. It was not a message, not a pulse, not a burst. It was more like a wavefront, a slow roll of energy sweeping through the void. The ripple lasted 3 minutes. It was detected by every major radio array on Earth. And embedded deep within its structure, hidden in the noise, was the 9-hour rhythm. The objects were gone, but the pattern remained. As the 3-minute ripple faded into cosmic silence, the world scientific community found itself standing at the edge of an unsettling possibility. 4 interstellar objects had entered the solar system, moved in perfect synchrony, interacted with Earth's magnetic field, slowed in unison, and vanished without leaving debris, thermal signatures, or gravitational disturbances behind. Yet the 9-hour rhythm remained imprinted in the ripple that washed across the solar system, as if marking the end of one phase and the beginning of another. The question hanging over every research center, observatory, and space agency was the same. What had just happened? The search for answers began with Earth itself. If the objects were gone, perhaps the planet carried some trace of their passing. Magnetometers across the globe recorded unusual fluctuations in the hours following the disappearance. The disturbances were faint but consistent, echoing like soft aftershocks in the geomagnetic field. The patterns weren't random. They aligned with the same 9-hour cadence exhibited by the 4 cosmic visitors. This left scientists divided. Some argued that Earth's magnetic field was simply stabilizing after a temporary disturbance. Others believed the fluctuations were not residual at all. They were new. At the same time, radio observatories continued scanning the region where the objects vanished, hoping for a return pulse or an echo. For days, there was nothing except the usual cosmic background noise. But on the 5th day, observatories in Australia and South Africa detected a strange distortion, a slight bending of low-frequency radio waves passing through a narrow band of space. It wasn't a signal, it wasn't artificial, but it wasn't natural either. The distortion behaved like a lens, bending radio waves inward before releasing them. Space had never been seen doing this at such a small scale. The band was no larger than the orbit of the moon. Yet, within that region, something was subtly reshaping electromagnetic activity. And it was located precisely where the 4 objects had vanished. Scientists debated whether this was evidence of a temporary portal, a gravitational anomaly, or a wake left behind by whatever process removed the objects from view. Theories range from plausible physics to the most speculative ideas humanity had ever entertained. But one fact remained undeniable. The distortion was real. Further observations revealed something even stranger. The distortion fluctuated, and those fluctuations occurred every 9 hours. Meanwhile, researchers sifted through data from before the disappearance, looking for clues that had been overlooked. They found one. A faint mutual tug among the 4 objects. Not gravitational in the traditional sense, too weak for bodies of their sizes and distances, but a minute synchronization in acceleration and deceleration, as if they were being nudged by the same invisible hand. The nudges were identical in magnitude and occurred at the same time. The timing matched the 9-hour cycle. Suddenly, the objects did not look like 4 strangers arriving in coincidence. They looked like a network, a system, components of something larger, perhaps even fragments of a single architecture orchestrated across interstellar distances. One researcher proposed that the objects could have been scouts, automated systems probing magnetic environments, searching for signals, or laying groundwork for something yet unseen. Another argued they might be seeds, nodes of a distributed device that would only reveal its true nature after completing a task. Still others insisted the objects were natural, part of a cosmic resonance never before observed. But if they were natural, the disappearance demanded explanation. The idea that the objects simply moved beyond detection range fell apart quickly. Even distant comets or asteroids produce faint infrared heat signatures. But the region was empty, colder, and quieter than before the objects arrived. No mass, no dust, no debris, no lingering material of any kind. It was as though the four visitors had phased out of the solar system entirely. Attention turned back to the ripple. The wave that had passed through the solar system was subtle, but it had measurable effects. Several satellites recorded timing anomalies in internal clocks. GPS networks experienced micro delays. Undersea communication cables registered faint electromagnetic disturbances. All small, all temporary, all occurring within seconds of the ripple's peak. Clocks drifting by microseconds might seem trivial, but atomic clocks do not drift, not unless affected by gravitational or relativistic forces. The ripple had not just been a passing wave, it had been an event. No one could explain why the ripple carried the 9-hour imprint. But the imprint was unmistakable, a modulation woven into the wave itself, not a message, but a mark, a signature. Theories multiplied. Perhaps the objects had activated something. Perhaps they had interfaced with the solar system in a way Earth could not yet understand. Some even theorized that the ripple had been a departure wave, the energetic footprint of the objects leaving space-time or transitioning into some other dimensional state. Others believed the ripple was not caused by exit, but by arrival. It was during this period of uncertainty that new data arrived from an unexpected source. A small, aging satellite in lunar orbit detected a series of faint magnetic pulses. The pulses were weak, almost lost in background noise, and would have gone unnoticed if not for the fact that they matched the 9-hour cycle. The pulses did not come from the moon. They came from a point roughly 200,000 kilometers beyond it, still within Earth's extended magnetic sphere. The objects were gone, but something was still here. In response, telescopes were redirected, radar beams fired, and radio arrays tuned to the lowest possible frequencies. For hours, nothing changed. But on the 8th day after the disappearance, the distortion band near the moon shifted just slightly, a wobble barely a fraction of a degree wide. Yet the shift aligned perfectly with the 9-hour cadence. The distortion was moving, not fast, not erratically, but consistently and predictably. It drifted along the edge of Earth's magnetosphere, gliding like a silent shadow, never appearing in visible light, never emitting heat. Only warping radio waves and magnetic fields enough to be detected by the instruments sensitive enough to notice. Scientists wondered if the distortion was the residue of the objects, a leftover field, or an artifact of their interaction with space. But as the anomaly drifted around Earth, its behavior became unmistakable. Its movement was too smooth, too intentional, too synchronized. It was following Earth's orbit. As days passed, it became clear the anomaly was not leaving. It was tracking, observing, orbiting. The possibility that the objects had left behind a device, a remnant, a monitor, a sentinel, became impossible to ignore. Some believed it was artificial. Others believed it was a natural phenomenon reacting to magnetic fields. But no one could deny what the data showed. The 9-hour cycle continued. The distortion continued. Something remained. And what remained was watching. The world space agencies quietly met behind closed doors, debating whether to release the information or bury it indefinitely. Some argued humanity deserved the truth. Others feared panic. Others feared something worse, that whatever was out there might not be done. For now, the anomaly drifts in silence. Its presence known only to those who study the sky in its deepest frequencies. It has no shape, no heat, no light, only rhythm. A slow beat echoing through the solar wind, repeating endlessly across the void. 9 hours, always 9 hours. What it means, no one knows. But one thing is certain. The 4 visitors were not the end. They were the beginning.